Welcome to Sound Stations. Please pick up a pair of headphones and be seated.
Hot Top Mumbles, I got a very important job for you.
You can count on us, big boy.
Hurry, I got one. What did he say?
He said, what's the job, boss?
Everything in this room may change time and time again as we move ahead. But the basic philosophy of what we're planning for Disney World is going to remain very much as it is right now.
Come on, gang. Let's take it home.
WDW Radio, your information station.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the WDW Radio Show, your Walt Disney World information station. I am your host, Lou Mongello, and this is show number 556, and I'm here once again not only to help you have the best vacation experience, but I also want to bring you a little bit of Disney magic wherever you are, not just with the podcast, but with my live video broadcasts on Facebook every Wednesday night, videos, blogs, special events, audio tours, books, and more. You can find everything over at WDWRadio.com. And whether this is your first time visiting or you've been to the parks hundreds of times, if you're planning a vacation or just love the details, secrets, and stories, there is something here for you, because each week I'm going to take you from the parks to the screens and everything in between. You can find all past episodes in iTunes or at WDWRadio.com. So we recently discussed Finding Florida, why, when, and how Walt Disney World came to Orlando, and this week I'm going to share part 2 of our look into exactly where Walt wanted to build, including the legend of the remote island at the center of Walt Disney World and how that figured into Walt's decision. We're going to explore his secret meetings and purchases and share many of the untold stories and maybe a few names that you never knew, including the first real residents of Walt Disney World, his hidden home, and when, where, and why Walt first stepped foot on Walt Disney World property. I'll then have the answer to our last Walt Disney World trivia question of the week, and I'll pose a new challenge for your chance to win a Disney Prize package. Then stay tuned to the end of the show for more information about upcoming events, meets of the month, your voicemails, and more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of the WDW Radio Show.
Walt Disney, who will bring a new world of entertainment, pleasure, and economic development to the state of Florida. Walt Disney. Mr. Disney, this is the largest press aggregation I have ever seen in the state of Florida. And I think it bespeaks the interest of the 6.5 million citizens of Florida for the great expectations that they have from this hour.
Well, Mr. Governor, this has been a wonderful reception that you've given us here. All the faces seem friendly and feel very much at home. And of course, this is this big, exciting project for us, too, you know. I mean, in fact, it's the biggest thing we've ever tackled. And I might, for the benefit of the press, explain that my brother and I have been together in our business for 42 years now. He's my big brother, and he's the one that, when I was a little fella, I used to go to with some of my wild ideas, and he'd either straighten me out, put me on the right path or something, or if he didn't agree with me, I'd work on it for years until I got him to agree with me. But I must say that we've had our problems that way. That's been the proper balance that has been needed in our organization. And he watches out for the financial side of it, for the corporate side. And in this project, though, I'd just like to say that I didn't have to work very hard with him on this project. He was with me from the start. Now, whether that's good or bad, I don't know.
Walt, everyone in the state has been thrilled with the announcement of your purchases. Located some 12 miles south of Orlando, and of course they are all excited to know just what type of attraction or what type of usage will be made of this great location.
We have many things in mind that would make this unique and different than Disneyland.
Will it be at Disneyland?
Well, I've always said there will never be another Disneyland, Governor, and I think it's going to work out that way, but it will be the equivalent of Disneyland.
A few weeks ago on show 553, we discussed Finding Florida, why, when, and how Walt Disney World came to Orlando. And in that show, we explored some of the legends of when and where Walt's second Disneyland was going to be built and why they never came to be, as well as how and why he eventually settled in Florida. Well, this week, we're going to continue that conversation as we look at exactly where in Florida Walt Disney ended and the many challenges even before the first pile of dirt was moved. And it sort of reads almost like an old pulp crime novel, right? There were decisions and deceptions and mystery, and then a lot of scrambling and changes, and then having to address the biggest, saddest, unexpected challenge of them all. And joining me once again this week is Jim Korkis, the author of literally dozens of books, amazing books, by the way, about the Disney parks, movies, stories, and characters. And when I say characters, I mean both on the screen and behind the scenes, including his latest book, The Unofficial Walt Disney World 1971 Companion, which, as an aside, I absolutely love. Jim, my friend, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I hope I'm not the big tragedy that's at the end of this story. No, and again, a lot of the stories that I shared a couple of weeks ago and I'm going to be sharing today, again, come from that book, and it took me years to write and research the book, and lots of interviews with people who were involved, and I actually got a very nice email this week from Disney legend Bob Gurr, and he says, I'm over halfway through your book and I found 2 typos, and I was ecstatic. Not because he had found 2 typos, but because that's all he had to complain about after reading the book. He said, "My gosh, yeah." He says, "You're right on the mark. You got it." And he said, "I just love hearing about some of these people that I worked with, and he says I was doing so many other things that I didn't get to hear some of this other stuff, and so I'm learning that in your book." So it's always great to get that sort of reinforcement from the people who were actually there, because you've got to be really careful about that, because there's a lot of misinformation out there that just keeps getting repeated, so you just accept that. Because the other thing he was writing about was, I had written a story about the Mineral King ski resort, and he loved the entire article except for one sentence which said that he had designed a high-capacity ski lift for the area that Walt loved and wanted to sell to other, places around the world, to help raise money for Mineral King. He says, "That's incorrect. That never happened." I said, "Bob, I got this from this book, and I got this from this magazine that was published by a Northern California university about, all the legal wranglings, and so they had the description of, what the proposal was for Mineral King." He says, "Yep, nope, the rest of the proposal was right." He says, "I didn't do the ski lift." I said, "Okay." I said, I tried due diligence to do that research, but you just never know. But again, we're losing all of these people too. So thank heavens Bob's still around here to keep me honest, because a lot of these people, and you've been in that position yourself. A lot of these people are no longer with us. I in the book I quote an awful lot from about the creation of Walt Disney World from Charlie Ridgway, and Charlie Ridgway just absolutely loved you. I don't know if you remember, but you held that one event for your fans at the American Adventure. Mm-hmm. And before we went over there, we were, right next door, having coffee and a dessert, and we were just talking away with Charlie there, and he was sharing some of those stories. And you, of course, had to go over and handle the event. I, however, sat down and wrote
wrote everything Charlie said, right?
So a little bit of Lou Mongello is in this book as well, and last time we talked about all these other places that Walt was looking at, because he was looking for an East Coast thing, but he always had a fondness for Florida because, of course, his mom and dad got married in Florida. In fact, they got married in Lake County, and in fact, it was the very first marriage license that was issued in Lake County. They got married in Flora's parents' home in Kismet, which I don't think exists anymore. But Walt's father was out here. He worked on a farm. He worked managing the Halifax Hotel in Daytona Beach, and Halifax Hotel doesn't exist anymore. But I think there's a Halifax Avenue or a Halifax Road there, and he worked as a mailman in Kissimmee. He then bought an orange grove, and then he got really, really sick. So that's why they moved to Chicago, because the World's Fair there was the Chicago World's Fair was being built, and so Elias got a job as a carpenter there. But and again, this is why it's hard to sometimes do research, is his mother's side of the family, stayed down there, and some of them were school teachers and things like that. One was a postmaster, whatever. But a story that I include in the book, but it was difficult to confirm, was that when Walt and Roy were younger, that sometimes during summer vacation from school, when they were in Marceline and all of that, by golly, they came down to Florida to stay with Uncle Albert and Aunt Jessie. Jessie was one of Flora's sisters, Flora being Walt's mom. And supposedly by the Ocala National Forest, they spent time during the summer doing that. But what's frustrating is Walt and Roy, never talked about that. Especially Roy. Roy was, really reticent about saying anything about his past. So, Walt was familiar with this area, and again, the Disney organization decided that was a good thing, because if Walt unexpectedly got spotted in Florida, they could say, well, he's just tracing his roots. His maternal grandparents are buried in a cemetery down here and all that. And Walt was known for going back and trying to trace, the roots of the Disney family. And a great story that I couldn't include in the book. So here's an exclusive for your podcast here, and I'll try and share a couple of those things, because the toughest thing about a book is not writing the book and what are you going to include in the book. Sometimes the toughest thing is, what do you have to leave out? Simply because, it's a tangent, or it doesn't fit in, or it just repeats something that's already been said in a different way or from a different person or whatever. So one time when Walt was in the Florida area checking it out, he was with a couple of Disney executives. He would always travel with other people, to try and get feedback and all that. So they're in this diner, and when Walt got all worked up, he would lose track of anything, and he'd be so focused. And so they're there, and this waitress came by their table, I guess, to see if they needed some more coffee or whatever. And she looked at him and she goes, you sort of look like Walt Disney. And Walt goes, sort of. And he stands up and he's reaching into his pants pocket, trying to pull out his driver's license to show to her. And the executive, no, sit down. No, it's all right. So yeah. He gets told that a lot. Yeah, no. And so that's why when Walt was out there, he would be on a pseudonym. His pseudonym was Davis, Walter E. Davis. And the reason for that was, of course, so that if somebody said Walt or whatever, he would respond. He wouldn't have to try and remember, what is my fake name. And again, W.E.D. would match, any monograms that he had and all that. And Davis, of course, came from the fact that his niece, Marjorie, had married Marvin Davis. Marvin Davis worked at Disney and created the layout for Disneyland, and then later the layout for Walt Disney World. So, you've got that. And in fact, Roy used Davis as a pseudonym as well. So when he went down to Miami and all of that, Roy would sign in as Roy Davis. And again, there was this whole level of secrecy, and you compared it to, like, crime novels and all that. Disney executives that I talked to compared it to like a James Bond operation. Bump. And so those people who are listening to the podcast, if in the background you can keep in mind the theme song for Mission Impossible, bump, bump, ba-dum, bump, bump, ba-dum, bump, bump, because there was that level of secrecy, because the real fear was if people knew that Disney was buying in Florida, then what would happen is prices would just, shoot up tremendously, which they actually did. When Disney was purchasing large acreage out in Central Florida, they were buying it at, on the average, about $185 an acre, which meant that some was a little less, some was a little more, but generally $185 an acre, which, again, you're not swindling people, because that's pretty good money for Florida swampland, basically. Nobody's interested in buying that land. So, that's a good, solid price for that. But
right. Some of this property was getting sold, in the back of magazines and newspapers to, unsuspecting people who thought they were buying.
Well, that was part of the problem. Disney bought all of these large parcels of acreage, and then suddenly people are getting, what is this? But what happened is that back in 1913, there was a company, the Munger Company, and what they did is they put in ads, across the country that you could buy, an acre or 2 acres or 3 acres of Florida paradise land, for just a couple of bucks. And people were doing this, and then they'd come out to Florida and they found that their land was just inaccessible. There was no road there, or it was swampland, or some of it was even underwater, because the Munger Company had hired somebody to subdivide, sections of the land, and the guy had never been to Florida in his life. So he just divided up things. And so people would come out expecting, oh my gosh, it's a tropical paradise. And, oh, geez, And so some of this ownership, people just hung on to or passed down to their kids, and sometimes their kids had never even, known. It was like when I was growing up, one of the things my dad did for me and my brothers was there was a company called something like One Share, and you could buy like one share of Disney stock, or one share of Wendy's, or one share of Sears, or whatever. And so basically, you could paper, one of your walls with these stock certificates, and so that's basically what was happening. Is Disney purchased two huge land sections, but there were pockets in there that had been owned by these people who had bought this stuff decades ago, and so it took them a year, 2 years of calling 24 hours a day, trying to track down the owners of that land, or people who had inherited it, from, and some of them didn't even know that. So they were going through, county records. They hired a law firm to, try and track these people down. And when I say 24 hours a day, that's exactly it. That even during a hurricane, they were phoning people, in California and Colorado and all of this. And as I said, some of these people didn't even know that they owned this. And again, when I say an average of $185 an acre, what this is that they had to pay $300 to some of these people, because they go, well, we didn't even know we owned this, but if you're calling and want this must really be valuable. So, we're gonna ask for this.
And obviously they're obviously not saying. And this is the thing that we talk about the secrecy aspect of it. This is the thing that I love and intrigues me, and I think we're all relatively familiar with how they came to Florida in secret. They stayed over in Tampa. They flew over the area, which is Riles Island, and Walt said that's it. Mm-hmm. But everything sort of leading even up to this point was done in secret. So, they couldn't call from their hotel directly to Disney. They had to call New York, and that call would get forwarded. There was so much going on that, well, first of all, it was not only in secret, but couldn't even happen today, right? They were flying with fake names. They were going, taking one-way trips from California to Kansas City to Buffalo to Florida, just to sort of throw people off the trail.
Oh gosh, yeah. And again, the law firm that Disney was using was Donovan, Leisure, Newton, and Irvine. And they were a New York law firm, so you're right. So all calls went to up there to New York, and then would be funneled out to California. But the Donovan in that law firm name, that was Wild Bill Donovan, William Donovan. He was the guy who formed during World War II the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, mm-hmm. and that's developed into the CIA. And so Donovan is considered, the father of the CIA, and many of the people he had working for his law firm were people who had connections, with basically spies. In fact, one of the people who were working at that time for that law firm was William Casey, who would later go on to be director of the CIA. And they also hooked them up with a Miami law firm run by Paul Hellawell. And Hellawell was the guy who helped launch the CIA's secret war in Indochina. And the reason he was in Miami is he had been working for the CIA in 1960 there to coordinate dirty tricks against Fidel Castro. So basically, Disney is having these law firms who have these CIA connections to do this. And in fact, Hellawell is the guy who came up with the idea of, look, you want to run this property, then you better, create that Reedy Creek Improvement District. You better have two cities there, and then you can control all of that. And Hellawell is also the guy who came up with the dummy corporations. You didn't want to have just one corporation buying the land, because then that was going to be suspicious and under investigation. So you have a bunch of different corporations. So he came up with the names Tomahawk Properties, Reedy Creek Ranch, Latin American Development and Management Corporation, Madera Land Company, Compass East Corporation, Bay Lake Properties, and then again my two favorites. And for those who wanted to see that, they can see those on the at Walt Disney World on Main Street and Center Street up there on a second floor window. There's a window that's called the Pseudonym Real Estate Development Company, and they list these, and they also list Roy Davis, Roy's pseudonym up there as the president. And so besides those other ones I named, they also had AYEFOUR Corporation, which of course is what, Lou?
I-4 for the interstate.
I-4 Interstate. Yep, that's it. And then the very famous MTLOTT, Empty Lot Company. Empty Lot Real Estate Investments. And so basically, Hellawell came up with all of these different ones of, so that you wouldn't go, why is Tomahawk Properties buying all of this land? Who owns Tomahawk Properties? If you have, a half dozen or more different ones, then it's like, well, why would someone like Howard Hughes, who they suspected was buying the land, why would he have these different companies? He'd only have one company for that. And again, taking a step back, something that you were mentioning was that, yeah, they came out, to look at in '63, in fall of '63, Walt and Don Tatum, Card Walker, Joe Potter, Buzz Price, Jack Sayers, a bunch of them, they came down, to check out, what should we be picking, out here, and it was Walt's feeling that, yeah, you better pick in the Central Florida area, because they were looking down at Miami because that was the big tourist spot, and Walt said no, he didn't want to be down there. He also didn't want to be next to the beach, because first off, the beach is distracting, and he didn't want people in wet swimsuits walking into Epcot. So he said, we've got to be further up, we've got to be further inland, and that would also offer protection from hurricanes, because back in those days it was like the hurricanes wouldn't hit in Central Florida. they'd hit down there near Miami and all of that, but and they'd hit along the coast, but they wouldn't hit inland. And then, of course, it's like one of the big things, of course, is you've got that cross section there. They're building I-4, and I-4 would connect with
75.
I-95, and so basically that would go up straight from Miami up to Maine. And Walt's feeling was, people are coming down to Miami. If we put it right in the center of the state, then people driving down, to Miami, they'll stop it over here at Epcot, or on their way back up, they'll stop, or we'll get them, both times. And then you had the east-west. You had I-75 that would link with I-10. So that would span, right from one part of the state all the way to California.
So, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong in terms of a story.
Well, you're wrong, Lou. Of course. Why would you have your own podcast? Why would you be doing this for decades?
Let me rephrase it.
Go ahead. What do you want to
tell me? How much of this story that I have heard is wrong? We know that in November of '63. This is sort of when this infamous flyover of the property came to be. It's when they land in New Orleans, they find out it's the day that Kennedy was assassinated. But as he's flying over a section of property by Bay Lake, sort of where Riles Island is, that's sort of where, according to story, he's like, that's it. This is going to be the place that we build. I've heard people say, and I've read over the years, well, Walt, we talk about Disneyland as the place where Walt walked, and there's something special to it. And yes, while Walt never actually saw, Magic Kingdom here being built, he did actually walk the property. And I've seen a picture of Walt on property, and I've tried to actually, and by asking people and researching, tried to figure out exactly where it was. And from what I understand, and I'm sure you're familiar with the photograph I'm talking about, the place that he was standing and sort of looking out, over the water would be where currently the marina of the Contemporary exists. And I've actually, I sort of made my incredibly nerdy pilgrimage out there trying to find that spot. And I stood there. I'm like, okay, now I can say I've walked where Walt walked. And I don't know if it's...
And actually, if you've been to Cinderella Castle, you walked where Walt walked, because he walked that particular patch of land as well, where Cinderella Castle. And the funny thing is you say, well, Walt never saw this. It's interesting. On opening day at Walt Disney World, one of the executives came up to Roy Disney and said, "Boy, it's a shame Walt didn't get to see this." And Roy looked at him and smiled and said, "He did." And what Roy meant was that when Walt was out there, the rest of them just saw, flat land and tangled woods and all of this nonsense and bugs and all of this. But Walt saw the castle. Walt saw a city. Walt saw all of this, in his mind clearly. It was just like, well, yes, people will build this, but I know exactly what this is going to look like as that happens. And yes, that November, they came down and they were just double checking. They went and they took a look at the Ocala area as well, because they were thinking of maybe going there instead of into the central into the Orlando location. And they even visited the Citrus Tower in Claremont there. So they were looking around. Yeah, and the plane flight was also to determine, gee, would it make more sense, to be, more towards the West Coast or the East Coast, maybe towards the ocean a little bit more, and nope, that was not the case. And yes, as they were flying over, Walt said, "That's it." and he also saw, as they were flying over, he also saw that huge tree that Bill Evans later relocated over, and it became the Liberty Tree. In Liberty Square there. It was over on another portion of the property there. And yes, they flew through, and then they had to land in New Orleans because, again, in those days, especially with a small plane, you have to stop to refuel. So they were going to stop overnight in New Orleans, and they landed there about 6 o'clock in the evening. And as they were driving to their hotel, they saw people huddled around, radios. In those days they had those Japanese transistor radios too, and people standing, in front of storefronts that had televisions that were running and all of that. And it wasn't until they got to the hotel that they were told that yes, President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, had been assassinated. And so they stayed overnight, and then the next morning, everybody was really quiet on the plane. There was no discussion. And as they started to come in to Burbank, Walt goes, well, that's the place, Central Florida. And but just saying that was not enough. You got to go, and you got to buy that land, And Walt liked Central Florida because, first off, the weather, you can run the park, year round. As we discussed last time, some of those other areas on the East Coast, there are a lot of amusement parks and all that just can't operate, during the winter. And again, with the snow and all of that, people couldn't get there. So, Florida, basically you can operate year round. So, good weather, and basically plenty of land.
So just very quick, so going back to the acquisition of the land, right? We sort of talk about how most of this land, or a lot of this land, was not necessarily usable. It was mucky, murky swampland. Mm-hmm. Although the Riles Island, just to quickly go back, the Riles Island that they had gone over in Bay Lake, that island is still there. That actually was Treasure Island back in 73 or 74. But there was actually somebody who was living on there. There was there was a hunter's shack over there, because again, a lot of people don't realize this was pretty much wilderness out here, and so hunters would come out, and there was a lot of wildlife out here, and even when Disney was building, starting in 69, 70, 71, you're running into, bears and and their families in the area where Fort Wilderness Campground is now.
There were tons of alligators. There were wild and so hunters came out. So yeah, there was a hunter's cabin out there on the island. There's even a photo of Roy out there, and so this is what this. But the whole land out here was a mess. Yeah, there was a ton of land that you could get, but we were talking about one of those large land acreage that got purchased that belonged to Earlo Bronson. So when people come out here and they go, "What is Bronson Highway out here? What does that mean?" Earlo Bronson was a pretty big mover and a shaker. He was a state senator, and he had a cattle ranch and all of that, and he sold some of it to the Dimitri brothers, and so Disney purchased the Dimitri land and then Bronson's land as well. But the thing is when Bronson bought the land, he bought it again, for cattle to graze and things like that, and the land had been owned by Tufts University in Massachusetts, and Tufts University sold the land to Bronson, but they didn't sell underneath the land. They still retained the rights underneath the land in case there were minerals there. And so part of the agreement was that Tufts University could come in any time and dig down, to try and pull out some minerals from the soil and all that. So Disney had to go and negotiate with Tufts, to buy the mineral rights to all of that land. And again, this was one of those James Bond operations. It was like, Tufts was going. They didn't know this was Disney, and they didn't. Why are you so interested in buying the mineral rights? And what is it? And they had no intention of exercising that, but they wanted to keep their options open. And Hallowell apparently took one of the main guys aside into a private room, and they were there for a while. And when the guy came out, they relinquished all the rights for like $15,000, which is more or less pennies. And just that land, Bronson and Dimitri's land there, that the Disney company paid $1,800,000 plus, for that. Overall, all of the land that Disney purchased totaled over $5 million. And that's just for the land. That's before you start doing any construction, before you start doing anything.
Which considering there's 27,000 plus acres, it's a bargain, right? By 2019 standards, and there's about
well, it is, and I always had to laugh at Roy's comment that thank heavens they found out Disney was buying the land, or Walt would be buying more land to this day,
Well, wasn't there, I mean, not that there was a conflict, but wasn't there, and this is why there were sort of two sides to the Disney Brothers coin. Didn't Walt want to just keep on, continue to buy as much land as possible because we don't know? Oh, gosh, yeah.
And
Roy was like, no, we've spent enough.
When I interviewed Joe Fowler over the phone before he passed away, he said, if Walt had had his way, he would have bought 50,000 acres. Because again, the initial plan was Walt was going to buy 10,000 acres. That was what the law firm and then they later partnered with Florida Land Ranch to determine land to be purchased. The original goal was 10,000 acres because Walt felt so constrained in Disneyland, that around Disneyland, these cheap little motels and souvenir shops and huge neon signs and all that. Walt always referred to it as like a secondhand Las Vegas there. He felt that not only do you need to have enough land, to really build, what you want to build, but you need to have enough land to have a buffer around it, because that affects people who have to drive in through all of that stuff to get to your location, and then have to drive through all of that stuff after they leave your location. It affects that overall experience. So he felt 10,000 was enough. But as they were doing this, more land was becoming available. And at one time, one of the people finding land for the Disney company came across 5,000 more acres. And Walt said, well, we should, and Roy, of course, was very fiscally conservative, and he said, no, we should stick with just the 10,000. And Walt said, look, how much would you pay now to have an additional 5,000 acres around Disneyland? Mm. And Roy went quiet and then goes, okay, buy the land.
Well, they learn from the issues, and if you've been to Disneyland, the experience of coming to the park is very, very different. You don't have that multiple mile buffer between the outside world and the bubble that is Walt Disney World. And I think, Jim, that's why a lot of the speculation initially when they saw all of these transactions happening was that it had to be some sort of major manufacturer. This was not going to be something on a small scale. That's why it was, aviation companies and Lockheed and Volkswagen and Chrysler, or even, maybe because of some of the mystery, Howard Hughes.
No, you hit a lot of the rumors there, and Ford Motors and a bunch. And I mentioned Howard Hughes. They thought maybe he'd be building a big helicopter plant out here, and that Hughes was always known for secrecy. Rockefeller. And in fact, one of the major rumors was the mafia was buying all of this land because they were going to build a casino, and then they could also dump bodies into the swampland out there. And so, people were thinking that. Disney came up, but Walt was out at Cape Kennedy in 1965 because Wernher von Braun, who is now director of NASA, had invited Walt to come out and see Cape Kennedy and Huntsville and all of that, because he was trying to get Walt all worked up to do another show for his television series about outer space, because von Braun was getting very frustrated that there was he wanted to go to the moon, and the U.S. government was dragging its feet and all that, and he had seen that in the 50s when he had done those 3 shows with Walt, that got Eisenhower all excited about launching, satellites and things like this. And so, boy, if we can get Walt excited and do a show, that'll get, the American public excited, and that'll get the government excited, and we'll go to the moon. And so Walt was out in Cape Kennedy in 1965, and somebody said, well, we heard that Disney is buying all of this. And Walt goes, no. He said, Walt didn't say no. But what Walt said was that he was already spending, millions of dollars to expand Disneyland. There was the whole new thing in 67, the new Tomorrowland in 67, and then right after that, 2 years after that, the Pirates of the Caribbean. And so he said, "Oh, I'm spending millions of dollars out there, and I just don't have the time, and I just don't have the talent. My hands are full." And so they just believed Walt. Why would Walt Disney lie, right? But he didn't say, "No, I'm not buying the land." He just said, "Look at all these other things. It doesn't seem to make sense, for all of that to be happening, And gosh, you just gotta love Walt. But of course, we're talking. This is 65, and so he is going to get tripped up. He is going to get tripped up big time because 65 is when Disney is doing its big tencennial celebration, celebrating 10 years of Disney. And of course, if you're going to have this big celebration, and again, we have to realize too that when Disneyland first opened, a lot of people just considered it a local attraction, and Walt's plan was, and that's why he was constantly promoting it on his TV series, was he wanted it to be recognized as a national attraction, that even if you're living in Iowa or you're living in Texas or whatever, you should think about coming out, to the West Coast. You can go to the beach, you can go to Knott's Berry Farm, you can pick oranges, and spend time at Disneyland, So in order to, get national attention, Charlie Ridgway was, pulling in reporters from around the country to come out and see, Disneyland in 65. And Disney still does that to this day. They do it with you, right? When there are new things that are opening and whatever, they go to Lou Mongello. Let's have Lou Mongello come out and take a look, because maybe he'll start telling people about this. And so, they were flying in people in the Disney plane, which could hold maybe about a dozen people. So, they were bringing in different people at different times to do this. And now when they got to the Florida, Georgia, Alabama area, there were several larger papers that just weren't interested in making the trip. It's like, we don't think our readers are interested in this, or our readers are not going to make, a trip to the West Coast. That's, again, one of the reasons why Walt wanted to build something on the East Coast, is that a lot of the people on the East Coast weren't coming out, to Disneyland. Yeah, I'll come out and visit Disneyland, but, maybe that's a day or a couple of days experience. That's not it, wasn't considered, a vacation destination. And so somebody suggested to Charlie that maybe they should go to Orlando. And Charlie had never even heard of Orlando. It was such a small, rinky-dink, agricultural, rural little city. But he took a look, and he saw that the Orlando Sentinel there was, it had a fair amount of circulation. That was the biggest paper in the area at that time. And so he figured, okay, well, a bunch of these others are turning me down. We've got some spots left on the plane. We'll ask Orlando Sentinel. And Orlando Sentinel considered it so insignificant that they sent Emily Bavar. Emily Bavar was the editor of their Sunday magazine that went into the Sunday edition of the newspaper. So again, this is like those fluff pieces, and go out and do a piece on the dog show, or the Girl Scouts that are making the biggest chocolate chip cookie in Florida or whatever, and so we're not going to send our top of the line reporters. We'll send Emily Bovard, and the moment she gets off the plane, she sees Charlie, who's welcoming all the reporters, and she says, "What's this we hear about Disney buying a lot of land in Florida?" And Ridgway was basically clueless, because there was only a small group. After that plane trip over Florida, a couple of days later is when they set up the war room to start doing that, and that was less than a dozen people, and it was called Project Winter, and then later it was called Project X, and then Project Future. It was never called Project Florida until after the official announcement was made. Because again, it's that James Bond secrecy, bump 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 bump. Project X. And so Ridgway was very sincere. And he goes, "I haven't heard of any of that. I guess you'd have to ask Walt when you see him at lunch tomorrow." And
she's like, "Okay, I will."
that was basically it. She went to lunch, and Walt sees this woman reporter, and Walt, of course, could just turn on the charm and the whole bit, and he didn't expect anybody from Central Florida coming out, because that wasn't on the original manifest there, so he was taken a little by surprise there, and so she started asking him these questions, and later in life, she said, "Yeah, I was asking these questions. It was like I threw a bucket of water in his face. He looked stunned, and he said, but he recovered." And she said, "What I found was curious was, he offered climate and population reasons why Florida would be unacceptable, and then in the next breath, how some of those things could be overcome, and then he would say, no, it's too hot and it's too wet and it's too remote and there's no and she said, for a guy who was not interested in buying land in Florida, he seemed to know an awful lot about Florida, and so she sent back, an article, and the Orlando Sentinel printed it, but again, just in a small, out of the way section. I talked with Walt Disney, and all of this, and then when she flew back, the editors and the publisher, sat down and talked with her, and they were pretty convinced by her, and so they actually put October 21st, 1965, they put a larger article, and they even had an editor's postscript where they apologized for not giving this story more attention when it was when she first submitted it. And so she did this, and apparently the reaction was very strong, because in the Sunday edition, which was October 24th, which about 3 days later, there was the big headline. Orlando Sentinel says, "We say mystery industry is Disney." Now, Joe Potter was the guy that Walt had brought in from the New York World's Fair to help, prepare the land. So he was down there taking a look at, what's going to, be needed, to get this and control the water and all of this. And he was staying at, again, a little motel, because there's not really any hotels in Orlando and all of this time. And he's staying there along with Bob Foster, who is the one of the Disney legal people who were doing this. And you mentioned Kansas City, flying to Kansas City. Bob Foster's mom lived in Kansas City. So when he would leave Florida, he would make that stop in Kansas City, to visit his mom and all that, but before he went on to California. And so people were taking a look at, wait a minute, this is a guy who's doing a bunch of stuff here for these corporations, and he's going to Kansas City. So, what's in Kansas City? TWA and, Howard Hughes, all is that it, for that to happen. And again, Foster's name was listed in the annual report. So he had to go under a pseudonym as well. His middle name was Price, Robert Price Foster. So he went by the pseudonym Bob Price. So a lot of people just knew him in Orlando as Bob Price, for that to happen. So he was over there as well. And so, Potter comes down for breakfast and looks at the front page of the Orlando Sentinel and says, "We say mystery," and they have all of this assumption from Emily Bavar, who ends it with saying, Walt said there will only be one Disneyland, and then he paused. As such,
you almost get the sense that he wanted to say it, like he was. He always kept on appending, and kudos to her for picking up on those very small, almost insignificant cues that individually probably wouldn't have amounted to much, but together, like, he wasn't saying it was, but he wasn't saying it wasn't. Like, for some reason, I think of the end of the original Iron Man movie.
Well, both Potter and Foster phoned Walt immediately because they felt that they were going to get blamed for, the leak and all of that. And Walt assured them no. Walt basically told Potter, he says, "I guess I just talked too much." Well, and again, he was all excited about this, and so they realized they had to do damage control. So this was Sunday the 24th, and on Monday the 25th, the governor of Florida, Hayden Burns, was scheduled to speak at a convention, and so Disney, which didn't want to announce this until November, gave him permission to announce there, so that they could get ahead of this. Now, one of the things I want to point out, too, is that when you read this story in other articles, other books, whatever, Emily is referred to as the girl reporter, And so for the book, I did some research, and when she went out to talk to Walt, she was 45 years old. So she was as much a girl reporter as Lois Lane.
Well, and it's just interesting, again,
a girl reporter.
A sign of the times, having to, the fact that they sort of specifically called out that she was a female reporter instead of just saying reporter is convinced that it's Walt Disney.
Right. And again, you have to realize they sent her because, again, it's like, we're not going to send our top-of-the-line reporters, This will be a nice little trip for this woman here, to go out there and spend, a couple of days because we can't send a couple of men. We have work to do out here. Men are doing the work. She's just doing this little fluff Sunday magazine, for all of that. And so it's interesting that that's what tripped them up, is that they underestimated, everybody underestimated the power of a woman. For that to happen, and then again, the announcement was made, and so people are going crazy because they're thinking, "Oh my gosh, there's going to be a Disneyland in Florida," and need to realize that Walt never intended that there would be Disneyland East, that type of thing. He again, his vision was something else, and that's why it was very frustrating when there was the official press conference on November 15th, 1965. That was at the Cherry Plaza Hotel, which I don't think exists anymore. But Walt's there, and Governor Burns, and Roy, and all of that, and the state troopers are bringing them in this black limousine, and all of this, and basically everybody was waiting for Walt to say, "I'm building another Disneyland," and Walt, gosh, not saying that. And in fact, one of the things I did for the book, because again, it's very important to go with original documents and first-person documents, is I sat down and I transcribed Walt's press conference on November 15th, word for word. And I know you've been very kind and say, well, Jim, there are people you can pay to do that. But again, especially with this, I wanted to make sure, because oftentimes I've seen transcriptions where, words have been left out or, whatever. And so I think on YouTube you can go and you can see part of the press conference. Mm-hmm. But nobody transcribed it. I would have loved to have found somebody who transcribed it so I could have cut and pasted it into the book, but I couldn't. So, I included that. And even Governor Burns had to summarize at the end there that Mr. Disney is saying that, he's going to build something, an entertainment venue comparable to Disneyland, but it would be different. And in fact, during the conference, too, Walt said that there would be different things, because one of the points was to get maybe some of the people from California to fly out to Florida to see this, because there would be different things, Well,
it's interesting, too, because this was completely unscripted. Walt did not sit there with cue cards and a script that, Marty or somebody wrote for him. This was just Walt sort of going very much conversationally off the cuff.
Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to Bob Thomas, who wrote, I think, one of the best books about Walt, an American original, Walt Disney, an American original. And I remember two things that Bob told me about that. But one of them he told me is that, first off, he told me he never would have wanted to work for Walt because Walt would have been too tough a boss. He loved Walt and he respected Walt, but he never would have wanted to work for Walt. But the second thing he told me is, you ask Walt a question and he will give you an answer about what he wants to talk about. It has no relationship to any of it. And so you see that at the press conference there too, because there's all these rumors that he's going to build two towns. That one is going to be called Yesterday and one is going to be called Tomorrow. And there's all sorts of talk about it. And after the press conference, there's no parades or rioting in the streets or whatever, but there is rejoicing that, oh my gosh, Disney is coming here. But Walt was so vague, and he was purposely vague because I think he felt that if he had tried to explain Epcot, it would have been so unusual, so out of the ordinary, that people wouldn't have been able to conceive this. I don't think people realize that when Epcot Center opened, one of the big things was people didn't grasp what an Epcot was. And what is the Epcot name? And in fact, you go back and you take a look at some of those news reports and all of that, and you see reporters just sort of stumbling over the word of Epcot. So I think at this press conference, the deal was, I don't want to, scare them more or less, but I want to assure them that, yes, we're going to be doing something, and, Roy's on board for this. And so, of course, again, we were talking about Disney paying about $185 an acre on average. As soon as it was officially announced that Disney was the one buying the land, and they hadn't bought all of the land yet, there were still bits and pieces that needed to come together, but they had options on all of this, options to buy this land. Sometimes an acre of land would go for $80,000. And in fact, there was 1 acre of land that eventually sold to Standard Oil to build a gas station for $300,000 an acre. And Standard Oil felt that they had gotten a bargain because in those days, too, people didn't fly to Orlando. Everybody drove cars. And so Standard Oil felt that if they had, right on the periphery of Disney property, the only gas station, the only game in town, so to speak, that's worth $300,000 an acre.
Right, like 20% back at that time would be coming to the area by airplane as opposed to what the numbers are now.
And again, there really wasn't even a sizable airport. It was the McCoy Jetport, which was actually part of an old military airport. And remember, in those days too, that we're not talking about jets; we're talking about prop planes. I don't know if any of your listeners are old enough to remember, that they would wheel out these steps onto the tarmac, and you have to walk up the steps into the airplane, and you could look out and you'd see the propellers, start to go. For that to happen, and again, it's all very cramped too, because, my gosh, this thing is metal and you're tossing it up in the air. You don't want anything, so heavy it's going to drop. And here's an interesting trivia question. So where did the concept come from of those little jetway extensions that we have now that, go out and connect to the airplane? So you don't have to go out and walk up steps. You just, walk across. That is actually
the telescoping, like the telescoping jetways.
Right. Yeah. And I will tell you that was inspired by Disney. Really? And it was inspired by Disney as early as 1955. And it was inspired by Disney as early as 1955 by John Hench. Boy, what a tease I am, right? Basically, I've been doing some research because this year, of course, is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. And so I've been looking at, Disney's connection with outer space. In the first Tomorrowland episode, Man in Space, in 1955, it was run on the Disney Weekly television show. They do with animation, they show people would board, the rocket ship, and the rocket ship would take off. Well, my gosh, that's expensive to animate people walking across the tarmac and, climbing up steps to get into the rocket and all that. So John Hench came up with that design that, my gosh, what would happen is that jetway would extend out into the rocket ship. And so that is how the Rocket to the Moon attraction was designed at Disneyland, that basically you're going through that little jetway into the rocket ship. You don't have to climb up steps to get into the rocket ship. And so somebody somewhere took a look at that and goes, well, that makes sense. We could do that with planes. So anyway, the McCoy Jetport, and again, that's why if you're flying into Orlando on your luggage tag, it says MCO. It's because that was the designation of that area. McCoy Jetport expanded into Orlando International Airport, but it retained that same designation, MCO, McCoy. See, isn't it great to listen to Lou's podcast where you learn all of this stuff so you can go and you can tease all of your friends who, think they know everything about Disney, and you can go with this. So anyway, on the land, and I think we talked about this maybe off mic, that to make sure that the land was secure, they had a resident live on that land. Do you remember that, Lou, from the book there?
Yeah.
Philip N. Smith.
Yeah, and that's a name that's very much lost. I mean, you talk about, bits of trivia and obscura. I think maybe we take for granted the fact that because of this quasi-governmental municipality that's created, there have to be, and this is maybe a separate conversation for what's going to have to be part 3 of the show, that there have to be people that live in the vicinity, in the Lake Buena Vista, Reedy Creek Development District that have voting rights and things like that, and that there have to be actual residents there, and that there had to be a very first one, and the name Philip Smith is certainly a name I think that's been lost. Right,
and he was actually a lawyer with Hellawell's law firm, and he was operating out in Orlando, one of those bogus companies, the Compass East Corporation. He was in charge of that, and then Bob Foster felt, really to secure this area, you need to have maybe a family living there. And so in June '66, Smith and his family, his wife, and he had a son and a daughter. You talked about a cabin out on Riles. There were houses. There were little hunting cabins and houses all, around on the property because people would come there, again, on a vacation or something like that. So they moved into this little house that was already on property, and it's roughly about where Saratoga Springs Resort and Spa is today. But in those days, that was pretty much the wilderness. There were 2 unlit dirt roads that connected to the main county road, and the closest shopping the Smith family could do was in Winter Garden. And just to go to Orlando is 15 miles away, and again, the neighbors there were raccoons and owls and alligators and things like that. And again, when Walt and executives came out, they would go and they would go to the Smith residence there, because there were 3 bedrooms, so they could set aside a bedroom, for visitors, and then they had jeeps to take people out on property. And here's another story that again just did not have enough room for in the book, because the book's already 300 pages. This could have gone on for 600 pages, but Smith told a story of one time Walt coming out with Lillian and packing him into the Jeep, to go out and take a look on the property there, and Walt just loving this, and Lillian just being so upset about, being jostled, and, it's like, I never want to come back to Florida again is basically what she said, and Lillian, of course, was like that. It took that monorail in Germany that was suspended from the overhead rail, and it would just swing back and forth. And she goes, "I don't want to ride a monorail again," which is why Walt came up with the idea of the saddleback system, for the monorail that we have. And so, the Smith. It became part of the Disney legal department. Became a senior vice president. He passed away in 2016. He was 83 years old. Nobody, and his secretary. Talk about secrecy. The secretary that he had had graduated from University of Miami. And she was going to be accepted by this Miami law firm. And in the interview, she said they could not tell her who her employer was, but she should be she should be ready to begin work January 1st. And she was worried because she had read in papers that companies like the Latin American Land Company, and she knew that there were communists in Latin America, so she was worried that they couldn't tell her because maybe she was working for the communists. And God bless her. She was another one who should be a Disney legend, because it was her job to type up every word of the legislative proposal for the Reedy Creek Improvement District. That's hundreds of pages, and so this is back in the days when there's no computers, so you do this on a manual typewriter, no electric typewriter, manual typewriter, and you can't make any mistakes because this is a legal document, right? And hundreds of pages, and then she had to photocopy them and collate them and for copies. And so the Reedy Creek application was literally 5 inches thick. And again, one of the jobs that Smith had was not just living on the property, but was presenting, preparing the application, presenting the application. And he said, there was nothing really, he said it was complicated, but there was nothing really unusual about it. Improvement districts were really pretty common, but usually they were for rural areas where, they didn't have a postmaster or a garbage collection or, whatever. And so you have an improvement district. So the landowners, take care of some of those services on their own. But again, I never realized that this was going to happen. But if the listeners are this interested, maybe we should do a third show and talk about Reedy Creek, talk about the Epcot film, and then also talk about what happens when Walt passes away and the Disney company the initial reaction is they're going to sell all of the land in Florida. They're not going to go through with this project because who could make this dream a reality other than Walt Disney?
And I think we should. I think this, because think about when this is happening. Again, sort of what you're talking about now is in early 1966.
We're talking 65, early 66.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just a few months later that Walt unexpectedly passes, and along the way, there's other, hurdles and hiccups, not just the heat and humidity and animals and lack of resources and things like that, but Walt dies, and I think maybe, Jim, we can talk not just about what happens in terms of the Disney World project, but really the importance of what Roy does in terms of stepping up and stepping in.
Oh God!
And finishing.
I think he deserves
his own show, right? We need to do a show on
his
Roy.
own show, and so much recognition. And in fact, we may even have to do a fourth show of what the original plans were for just Roy's version of Walt Disney World, because I bet a lot of people don't realize that. At Walt Disney World, what is now the Main Street Theater, where you can meet Mickey and all of that, that was supposed to be an in-park hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it was designed by Mary Blair. That's why you have that porch and you have the rocking chairs. And if you look up on the second level, you see that there are individual balconies for each window, because that was going to be a hotel, and that was going to extend back. And also, as well as I do, that backstage is that parking lot area there too. The hotel would have covered that. So basically, you could have stayed in a Disney park and gone in. And so when it then became the Gulf Hospitality Center, the interior still looked like the lobby of a hotel, because that was going to be designed, as a hotel, and that there were plans for right out in front of the Magic Kingdom, an ice rink. An ice skating. They were throwing in everything but the kitchen sink into these things, and again, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary here, so and for those of you who can't wait for some of these stories, make sure you go to Amazon.com or ThemeParkPress.com and pick up a copy of the unofficial Walt Disney World 1971 companion. And I will tell you that people who were there, like Sully Sullivan and Tom Nabby and all of that, who I did interview for the book as well, have given it a thumbs up in terms of accuracy and all of that. And, one of the people that I interviewed, Imagineer Tom K. Morris, who as a 12-year-old got to come opening day at Walt Disney World. Mm. And so his story is in there as a 12-year-old of what it was like on opening day at Walt Disney World in October 71. And he got to go there because as a paper boy, one of the people on his route was Jack Sayers, who was in charge of all of the participants. And so he made arrangements. And so Tom got a VIP tour guide and, all of that. There's so many stories, to tell. And as I said, the book's over 300 pages, but it could have easily have been twice that length because there's so many stories. But yes, it really was a James Bond secret operation. And again, one that could only have taken place in the 60s, because today doesn't happen.
You're not flying in secret, right? You're not taking one-way tickets with a made-up name. That's going to get you on a few lists here and there, I'm sure.
Well, again, you have Disney writers today, on websites and all this, who are constantly checking to see if Disney has filed paperwork for any construction or whatever. You can't keep anything hidden. And
I'll tell you, one of the things that's been interesting about this, what is now becoming a series, since this is the second of however many, after the first show and after the second show, and this is a question I want to put out, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, so I'm gonna throw this out to you, as well as you, our friend, the listener who's sitting with us. When we were talking about all of the different locations that were either being considered to build a second Disneyland, or were rumored, and continue to be rumored. We continue to hear rumors of Texas, the North Central America, the Northeast, for yet another Disney park to be built after the second show.
Dubai, I've heard some recent rumors about Dubai.
So let me ask you this, not just little Jimmy Korkis, but you, our friend, the listener, if you are given the task and ability and financial resources to build another Disney in America, in North America, where would you build it and why there?
And remember, you're going to have to take into account enough land. You're going to have to take into account weather. You're going to have to take into account traffic flow. It's not just the case of if you build it, they will come. Right. They basically decided on Florida because they felt they would have access to the entire East Coast. And again, Florida already had a lot of roadside tourist attractions, Weeki Springs, Silver Springs, Bach Tower. So there were already some things in place. So remember, that's why they're called Imagineers. You don't just imagine. You don't just dream up the idea. There's the engineering part of it, of how do you make this work? So, a lot of times people have suggested the Midwest. Okay, well, what are you going to do, with tornadoes? What are you going to do, are there people there in the Midwest who can afford to go? Is there a large enough local population or enough of a tourist population that's going to support that? So you need to keep all of that in mind.
So, Jim, I'll give you till next time to think about it, and you, I won't put you on the spot. That's not fair. But you, the listener, I would love to hear your answer. The best way for you to share your idea or your vision of where another domestic Disney theme park can or should go to WDWRadio.com/community. That is our Box People group on Facebook. I'll post the question there. You can respond there. Better yet, you can even call the voicemail at 407-900-9391 and let us know. Share your idea via voicemail. And of course, Jim Korkis is going to be back to share more stories about Finding Florida, as well as so many more that he has. I'll put links to
and Jim Korkis also has another new book out called, if you're a Disneyland fan, Secret Stories of Extinct Disneyland. So it's the Disneyland I grew up with and remember. So there's interviews with two of the women who played mermaids in the Submarine Lagoon, two of the women who were space girls who walked around Tomorrowland in the 50s and the 60s. There's 80 different chapters covering everything from special events like Pooh for President campaign and Blast to the Past to all of those attractions like Flight to the Moon and all of that, the flying saucers and the stage coaches and the pack mules, all of those that are long gone that maybe you or your parents experience. So Secret Stories of Extinct Disneyland, and you can bundle that with the unofficial Walt Disney World 1971 companion, and I appreciate that tremendously.
I will make it easy for you. I will put links to both of those books, as well as a lot more of Jim's library in the show notes over at WDWRadio.com. Click on this week's podcast. You will find them all there. Jim Korkis, my friend, I love and so enjoy and continue to learn new things every time we get together. I appreciate you and what you share so very much, and I look forward to when we can get together and do this again.
And I appreciate you, Lou, and I also appreciate you giving me this forum so I can promote my books, and I can also share this information with those people who are really interested, and I know your listeners really are, and I hope they are. And so thank you so much. And for all of you listening, may all your Disney dreams come true.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Hey.
It's time for our Walt Disney World Trivia Question of the Week, where I invite you to test your knowledge of Walt Disney World's history or see how well you pay attention to the details, sometimes what you see or hear, or yes, even taste, because I'm always hungry. And if you think you know the answer, you can enter via our online form for a chance to win a Disney Prize package. Of course, before we get to this week's question, we're going to go back, review last week's, and select our winner. So last week, I asked you to identify who your friendly controller and a heck of a paleontologist is, if he or she does say so, him or herself. If you have ever ridden dinosaur or at least made it through the queue, you know that is Dr. Seeker, better known as Dr. Grant Seeker. Get it? Grant Seeker, played by Wallace Langham. He, along with his boss, Dr. Marsh, who's played by Felicia Rashad, talked to us about how the secrets to the future are truly found in the past, his unauthorized field trip, the perils of flash photography, and of course, how you should trust him because seriously, what could possibly go wrong? Anyway, I took all of the correct entries, randomly selected one. Again, you were playing for all 7 of my virtual audio walking tours of Magic, my 102 Ways to Save Money for an Walt Disney World book, all of which are available on Amazon.com as well as in iTunes. A WDW Radio vinyl sticker, a WDW Radio pop socket, and of course, a WDW Radio t-shirt. And last week's winner, randomly selected, is Jack Pietro. So Jack, you use the online forum. I have your shipping information and we'll get your prize package out to you right away. If you played last week and didn't win, that's okay, because here's your next chance to enter in this week's Walt Disney World Trivia Challenge. So this week, we're obviously talking about the history of Walt Disney World, a lot about Walt himself, and I was thinking about tributes to Walt in the parks. I actually did a show about finding Walt in Walt Disney World back on show 298, and one of my favorite references to Walt is actually at the Chapeau Hat Shop on Main Street, USA. I'll explain why when I give you the answer next week, but it's not only a tribute to Walt, and more specifically his wife Lillian, but also a reference to a Disney animated feature film. Your question this week is to tell me, what Disney film does the Chapeau Hat Shop in Magic Kingdom specifically reference? You have until Sunday, June 23rd at 11:59 p.m. to go to WDWRadio.com, click on this week's podcast, use the online form there. Again, you will play for all the digital products, my books, the audio tours, a vinyl sticker, a pop socket, and I will also send you a mystery prize as well. So good luck and have fun. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you so very much for taking the time to tune in. I know I say it every week, but I mean it because I do understand and appreciate how valuable your time is to you. I'd love for you to spend and share a little bit more of it with me and with us in our community over at wdwradio.com/community. That will take you to our Box People group on Facebook, where you can talk about not just this week's show, but come by, grab a snack, introduce yourself, and talk about all things Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, anything under the Disney umbrella, bubble, blanket, whatever you want to call it. Again, WDWRadio.com/community. You can also connect with me other places online. I am at Lou Mongello on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest. I'd love to hear from you. If you have a question you want me to answer on the show, email me, lou@WDWRadio.com, or call the voicemail. Be heard on the air at 407-900-9391. And speaking of community and conversation and friendship, I want to thank all of the new and longtime members of our WDW Radio Nation family. I sincerely appreciate all of your love and your support, and I also love being able to give back to you each and every month. I want to thank some of the new members who've joined the hundreds of you who are part of the Nation family, including Dean Bailey, Michelle Hull, Julie Guevara, Courtney Peterman, Jean Piasecki, Janet Sala, Alec Goins, and Sarah Ford. Your welcome packages are on their way to you. And if you want to find out how you can not only help the show, but you'll also get exclusive rewards every month, including custom scavenger hunts. We have a private Facebook group, custom Magic Band covers, logo gear, t-shirts, care packages from Walt Disney World, as well as exclusive live video group calls, early access to special events, and lots more. You can visit www.radio.com/support. And don't forget that a portion of your contribution, which is obviously completely optional, goes to our Dream Team project, which benefits the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America. Of course, as much as I love connecting and talking with you online, nothing beats a handshake and a hug. It's why I continue to do not just special events and cruises, but meets of the month every month in Walt Disney World. Our next meet of the month is going to be in Japan over in Epcot at really one of my favorite locations in any Disney park anywhere in the world. It's going to be at Katsura Grill at the lower level seating area. That's going to be Saturday, June 23rd from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can come alone, bring the whole family. It's fun, it's free, and you are very, very welcome. To RSVP to learn about other upcoming events, you can visit our events page at www.radio.com/events. And I am so incredibly thankful and cognizant of it every day for the opportunity and life that you have given me by your friendship, by your attention, by your support, that I want to try and help you individually or collectively to your business, event, or school. And there's a number of different ways I can do it through speaking and coaching and mentoring and special events. So whether you are hosting a conference, an expo, a retreat, or even an in-house workshop, I can custom craft a presentation for your business, including customer service and customer experience focused topics, including what your business can learn and implement from the Disney parks, leadership lessons we can learn from Walt, social media, including live video, podcasting, and the power of community building, as well as inspiring topics geared specifically towards your event and students from middle school through college. I can come to your event, to your business, or present virtually. I can also work with you one-on-one or in small groups through coaching and through my Momentum Weekend Workshop here in Walt Disney World. It's going to be September 28th and 29th and includes 2 days of presentations, speakers, interactive workshop, and an optional mastermind day on Monday. The event is limited to just 50 people. I've extended the super early bird pricing now until next week. To find out more, you can visit LouMongello.com. Thanks as always to Becky Menken and the entire team over at Mousefan Travel. Again, they are my official and recommended provider because it's who I have used and who I trust for more than 10 years, no matter what Disney destination or any vacation destination on the planet. They give you the best possible prices, all available discounts, and don't forget, it all comes at no cost to you. You can learn more and get a free no obligation quote at mousefantravel.com. Also, go subscribe and order back issues to Celebrations Magazine over at celebrationspress.com. And as always, my friend, and I mean it when I say that you truly are my friend, if you like the show, all I ask is that you please help spread the word. I'd love for you to let your friends know about it by tweeting out that you're listening. Share a link to this or your favorite episode on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And if you can, take just a couple of seconds to rate and review the show over on iTunes. It's incredibly helpful. I want to thank some recent reviewers like Flugang, Flugging, F-U-F-L-U-G-E-N-G, who says it's a supercalifragilisticexpialidocious podcast. Although relatively new to podcasts, it didn't take me long to find the best one, whose passion and genuineness is evident in each episode. I've already gone back to the beginning episodes to reminisce and learn more about Walt Disney World in those years where I lived on the West Coast and visited Disneyland more often than Walt Disney World. M-Slat61 says, wow, your show is amazing. I'm a new listener and regret not finding it sooner. Matthew W77 says 5 stars. Not only is it the best Disney podcast, but one of the best podcasts, period. And Dishar says, love it. I've just loved that I've started listening, although I know Lou on Facebook and have met her in person totally by accident. I've never been a podcast person, but now I listen whenever I can. There's lots to learn about something I thought I knew so well, and Lou and his guests are so positive and fun. I want to thank Dishar, Matthew, M. Slate, and Flugging, you. Thank all of you who have taken the time to rate and review the show. Just search for WDW Radio on iTunes or go to wdwradio.com/iTunes. It'll take you right there and show you exactly how to do it. And finally, and most important, again, my sincerest and humble gratitude to you and for you. You have literally changed my life in more ways than you know, and I recognize it, and I'm grateful for that gift every day. If there's something that I can do to help you, please email me, come to a meet of the month, let me know what and how I might be able to help you. And it doesn't matter where you are, how old you are, what you are doing. As a wise woman, Rabbit, once said, life's a little bit messy, and we all make mistakes. And no matter what kind of animal you are, change starts with you. And that's from Judy Hopps in Zootopia. And I interpret that to mean no matter who you are or where you are on your journey, if you are just starting out or need to sort of take things to the next level, change does start with you. It starts with a belief in yourself, the confidence, and those first steps, however small or large they might be. If there's some way that I can help you, either with a push or taking your hand and guiding you along the way, please let me know anything that I can do, because it's the least I can do to say thank you. So with that, I hope that you have your best week ever. So until next time, see ya. And thanks.
Hey Lou, this is Paul from Mansfield, Massachusetts. I'm a relatively new listener, but the show's really helped me with my commute to work in the morning, especially at 5:30. But I really enjoyed the recent episode about which Disney movies should be made into rides, because that's what I like to do when my parents tell me we're going to Disney, is think of everything I'd put in. So what I would put in is I would take Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I think is probably the most underrated Disney film, or at least is up there. I think it just might have gone over some of the kids' heads when it came out, just because of some of the topics like gypsies, they may have not known what that was. But what I would like to see is Quasimodo in Notre Dame in the Paris Pavilion in Epcot, where you go up one of the two towers and then Quasimodo appears and he says, hey, can you help me ring the bell? It's more fun when you grab the rope and jump down. And he says, go ahead, and you go way down, you bounce back up, kind of like the Tower of Terror, basically, although the sound of the bell would be just inside Notre Dame. Otherwise, I think it would just disturb some of the guests who are just trying to enjoy the pavilion. But I think Disney definitely needs thrill rides, so I think that'd be a really cool one. But another quick one I was thinking about was making Test Track Cars themed, where there'd be 3 lines. There'd be a Lightning McQueen line, there'd be a Chick line, and there'd be the King line. You get in one of the 3, and then each vehicle is actually them, and they're talking to you, telling you about the whole auto industry and how they build in Japan and Germany and all the other countries. And eventually 3 of them meet up and they say, hey, let's go for a race. And they go in their own individual little rooms where it's, pitch black, and they're giving themselves a pep talk like Lightning McQueen at the beginning, speed, I'm speed. And then their engines start to ramp up, and then the NASCAR lights go, and then they just shoot right out of the areas, and the outside track's actually wider, so the 3 of them are racing, and they go right across, race right across the finish line. You get 2 pictures, one of you in the car racing the other 2, and the other one would be Just You. But yeah, that's something that I've always been interested in, being a Disney Imagineer. But I have a few more thoughts, but just those are some of the quick ones. But, have a good one, Lou. All right, thanks. Bye. Hey, Lou, this is Paul from Mansfield, Massachusetts. I'm a relatively new listener, but the show's really helped me with my commute to work in the morning, especially at 5:30. But I really enjoyed the recent episode about which Disney movies should be made into rides, because that's what I like to do when my parents tell me we're going to Disney, is think of everything I'd put in. So what I would put in is I would take Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I think is probably the most underrated Disney film, or at least is up there. I think it just might have gone over some of the kids' heads when it came out, just because of some of the topics like gypsies, they may have not known what that was. But what I would like to see is Quasimodo in Notre Dame in the Paris Pavilion in Epcot, where you go up one of the two towers and then Quasimodo appears and he says, hey, can you help me ring the bell? It's more fun when you grab the rope and jump down. And he says, go ahead, and you go way down, you bounce back up, kind of like the Tower of Terror, basically, although the sound of the bell would be just inside Notre Dame. Otherwise, I think it would just disturb some of the guests who are just trying to enjoy the pavilion. But I think Disney definitely needs the thrill ride, so I think that'd be a really cool one. But another quick one I was thinking about was making Test Track Cars themed, where it'd be 3 lines. It'd be a Lightning McQueen line, there'd be a Chick line, and there'd be the King line. You get in one of the 3, and then each vehicle is actually them, and they're talking to you, telling you about the whole auto industry and how they build in Japan and Germany and all the other countries. And eventually 3 of them meet up and they say, hey, let's go for a race. And they go in their own individual little rooms where it's, pitch black, and they're giving themselves a pep talk like Lightning McQueen at the beginning, speed, I am speed. And then their engines start to ramp up, and then the NASCAR lights go, and then they just, shoot right out of the areas, and the outside track's actually wider, so the 3 of them are racing, and they go right across, race right across the finish line. You get 2 pictures, one of you in the car racing the other 2, and the other one would be Just You. But yeah, that's something that I've always been interested in, being a Disney Imagineer. But I have a few more thoughts, but just those are some of the quick ones. But, have a good one, Lou. All right, thanks. Bye.
Hello, Lou Mongello. It's Gabby Naldo from Columbia, Maryland. I had called in yesterday from the pop-up Disney exhibit in Anaheim. I'm now back home in Maryland. I just wanted to give a quick review. Long story short, Pop-Up Disney is the Instagrammer's dream, particularly, obviously, for Disney fans. It was just a really fun experience. If you're into Walls of Disney or very Instagrammable spots, this is definitely the place for you. They told me that the exhibition was actually being continued through fall, which I think is new. It was only going to be through, I think, early summer. So if you have a chance to be out in Anaheim between now and early fall, I would definitely recommend. It's a very quick experience, but definitely worth it. Alrighty, have a great rest of the week. Thank you. Bye.
Hey Lou, it's Christine Morrison, Flowertown, PA, on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. I'm riding around in the car, just finished listening to your Galaxy's Edge recap, and boy am I excited. Soon do my little work trip in October, and I'm hoping I can hit Galaxy's Edge. And I don't care if I get on a ride or not, I could just walk around, check everything out. I've been following everything you guys have been posting on it, and it just looks fabulous. And I sent a link to my brother, who is probably just as much of a Star Wars enthusiast as you are, and he said he's going to listen to it. So I'm trying to get him to drink the Kool-Aid on that one. So super, super excited for it. I can't wait. You guys sold me on it. It's going to be awesome. Anyway, the Julie Andrews interview was amazing. And I'm laughing because you always refer to how she says your name, so I paid particular attention to that. It was pretty cute. I loved it. Anyway, awesome. Have a great week, you guys. And, the movie I would like to see made into an attraction would be Meet the Robinsons, and you should put it either in Innoventions or in Tomorrowland. I think Tomorrowland. So anyway, love that movie. Take care, everybody. Make someone smile and have a great week. Bye.
Hello, Lou Mongello. It's Darlene Nagy from West Seneca, New York, and I'm calling with the countdown, and I have a special guest. It's Beatrice Dennis from Windermere, Florida. We have the countdown for you for the New Orleans adventure and cruise, and it's 234 days, and then we have your Adventures by Disney in Japan, 118. Yay! Hope you all have a magical day. Love and hugs. Bye, ya.